Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending my presentation today. Also, thank you, Professor Tinefeld and the whole conference organization team for this opportunity. My name is Nicola Morea. I'm a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Education of the University of Cambridge. As part of my PhD project, I am exploring pre-service teachers' beliefs about multilingualism and multilingual pedagogies. So today I will be talking about the preliminary findings from this study. I will start from some background information before moving to the methodology used, the results obtained, and a discussion of the results and the next steps in my project. So this study was carried out in the UK and in England specifically, and England has been traditionally considered a monolingual country. However, schools in England are becoming increasingly multilingual. Almost 20% of the students, of the primary and secondary students population, speak a language other than English at home, for example. And research has been stressing the need for all teachers across subjects and age groups to be linguistically inclusive in their practice. At the same time, research has repeatedly pointed at the link between beliefs, between teachers' beliefs and their actual teaching practice. And in this context, teacher education is considered to be a crucial period for the development of teachers' beliefs and their future teaching practice. And even if there has been a increasing research interest into teachers' beliefs about multilingualism, there is currently a lack of research exploring the beliefs of pre-service teachers in the national context of England. But beliefs about multilingualism is a complex construct. So in operationalizing it, I have adopted Lundberg's approach that he used in his study in Sweden. And I have looked at pre-service teachers' beliefs about multilingualism under two lenses. On the one hand, pre-service teachers' understanding of multilingualism, that is, in their opinion, who is multilingual? In their opinion, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being multilingual? And what role does multilingualism play in today's schools and society? But I also looked at the pre-service teachers' pedagogical beliefs related to multilingualism. So in their opinion, what are the rights and should be the support for students with English as an additional language in school and in the classroom? What is the role of students' linguistic repertoire in the classroom and specifically in the future lessons of these pre-service teachers? And what are their attitudes toward multilingual pedagogies? So the research questions really reflect this division. On the one hand, I wondered what are pre-service teachers' more general beliefs about multilingualism at the start of their teaching education course. And on the other hand, what are their pedagogical beliefs at the start of their teacher training course? So the methodology I have used to answer these research questions is Q methodology, which is an intrinsically quantitative and qualitative methodology. Basically, participants are asked to complete an activity called the Q sort, where they are given a number of statements. Each statement reflects a different opinion on the topic of inquiry, in this case multilingualism, and they need to sort them to place these statements onto a predefined grid based on their agreement. The completed Q sorts are then factor analyzed to extrapolate common factors, that is, shared viewpoints in that sample. Q methodology thus allows to statistically detect shared beliefs in a sample and by extension in a population, and these are then qualitatively examined and described by the researcher. This is an example. This is the grid that was used for this study. So imagine being a participant, having this grid in front of you with 30 statements, taking different positions about multilingualism and multilingual pedagogies. And you have to sort these placements in this grid based on your agreement. On the left side, you can see -4. On the right side, +4, meaning that is the column for those statements you most disagree and you most agree with respectively, and then the other columns progressing towards a zero column in the middle. There is a fixed number of statements that you can put in each column following a quasi-normal distribution. So really participants are encouraged to compare the statements and to prioritize some over others, so that at the end of the activity, a completed Q sort will look like this, where the statements have been placed in a way that best reflect the participants' viewpoint overall. Now, through factor analysis, it is possible to detect statistically compositions and configuration of statements that are similar in a given sample. So basically to group, to cluster those participants that placed the statements in a similar fashion together and find an underlying factor from that. The underlying factor then can be examined through a weighted average of the configuration of each of the participants that shared a similar configuration. It is possible to actually create a composite Q sort of the factor extracted, like this one. And then the researcher can qualitatively describe it and understand its main features. But before doing that with this, with the data from this study, some more information about the participants. The sample was made of 51 pre-service teachers who completed 2 Q sorts actually in October of last year at the start of their training. 1 Q sort was for the understanding component and 1 for the pedagogical component. 48 participants were training in England and 3 were actually training in Wales. They were recruited online through social media, but also with the support of some course managers for some of the teacher education providers. The age of the participants ranged from 21 to 52 with a mean of 28. 43 participants identified as female, 7 as male. The 51 pre-service teachers were training to teach a variety of subjects. 14 were training to become primary teachers, 15 to become modern languages teachers, 13 to teach a subject under the humanities umbrella, and 9 to teach a subject under the STEM umbrella. So there was a fairly good representation of the different subjects and age group across primary and secondary education. The analytical procedure, first of all, statements were actually adapted from Lundberg's statements used in the context of Sweden, and they were adapted to the context of England. Participants completed 2 Q sorts, and each Q sort had 30 statements each. The Q sort was administered online using the Q sort Touch website, and the analysis was carried out through the CADA Q methodology software. For factor analysis, principal component analysis with Varimax rotation was used, which is arguably the most common combination used in Q methodology. The selection of the components or the factors was carried out through an assessment of the scree plots, an assessment of the values of the eigenvalue of each potential factor, and the interpretability of each potential factor to retain. The results. I will proceed by first showing the results for the understanding of multilingualism construct. 3 intercorrelated factors were found, also referred to as U1, U2, and U3, U for understanding. Together, they explain 54% of the overall variance. 30 participants loaded purely onto one of the factors. When I say loaded purely, I mean that 30 participants had a significant loading onto only one of the 3 factors, whereas 18 had a mixed loading, so they loaded significantly on more than one factor at the same time. This just means that their overall viewpoints was partly represented by one factor and partly by another. 3 participants' Q source did not load significantly to any of the 3 factors extracted. So across the board, there was consensus on some statements. So we will look at this before looking at the differences between the three factors. So all participants agreed that being multilingual is an asset and provides cognitive advantages and future opportunities. In brackets, you can see the average score given to each statement across the three profiles. And you can see they are fairly similar, hence the consensus. Multilingualism is not a threat to the country's unity and to social cohesion, and being multilingual does not imply fluency, perfect fluency in all the languages of the multilingual person. However, there were also important differences, the first of which is related to the way multilingualism was conceptualized by the participants. If we look at Profile 1, participants aligning with Profile 1 believe that being multilingual does not mean speaking many different languages. One additional language is enough. This is also the only profile where participants did not reject the idea that everybody to some extent is multilingual. On the other hand, we can see that Profile 2 and Profile 3 shared exactly the same definition of multilingualism, where, according to them, there is a strict separation between mono and multilinguals, because being multilingual means communicating in 3 or more languages. So this view is, we can say, a bit more traditional. If we look at the second bullet point for Profile 1, according to these teachers, pre-service teachers, all languages are equally important. There shouldn't be any hierarchy of languages, and society values knowing more than one language. At the same time, schools and society, however, are not particularly multilingual. For Profile 2, again, all languages are equally important, but our society does not particularly value languages. However, society is multilingual. There are many multilingual people nowadays in England. And schools are becoming as well more and more multilingual. Schools are following suit. There are more and more representation of multilingual students. Profile 3, on the other hand, is a bit problematic because according to those pre-service teachers, some languages are more important than others, and society does not particularly value knowing languages. At the same time, these participants very strongly believe that society is monolingual and that multilingual students are the exception in school. But let's now look at how these same participants, what the beliefs about pedagogies are for these same participants. So the factor analysis found 2 distinct factors, so uncorrelated, completely distinct factors, also referred to as P1 and P2. Together, they explained 48% of the variance, with 42 pure loadings, 6 mixed loadings, and 3 non-significant loadings. There was consensus, again, across the 2 profiles, and across the board, pre-service teachers in my sample believe that schools should not have policies that enforce the use of English as the dominant language, and that teachers should actually encourage EAL students to maintain their first languages, and that the English learning process should not be at the expenses of the students' home languages. They also slightly agree that multilingual students might learn better in the classroom if they are allowed to use their other languages. And they also more strongly believe that acknowledging students' multilingualism in lesson benefits everyone. So it shouldn't be ignored or denied. However, the differences between the 2 profiles were stark. If we look at them, if we compare each bullet point, according to pre-service teachers aligning to Profile 1, newly arrived students with limited knowledge of English should immediately access the mainstream curriculum, but also, if you look at the second bullet point, receive support in the first language or languages. Although pre-service teachers aligning with this profile are not really sure whether they should also be given the option to be assessed in the first languages. If we look at Profile 2, they instead believe that newly arrived EAL students should take preparatory classes before being allowed to join the mainstream curriculum. At the same time, within the mainstream curriculum, they should not be entitled to receive individual support or be evaluated in the first languages. For Profile 1, back to Profile 1, EAL students are not necessarily associated with learning needs, whereas Profile 2 most strongly believe that EAL students have learning needs, which is, again, a bit problematic. And then, coherently, according to Profile 1, schools, they slightly agree that schools should change their way of teaching due to this, to adapt to students' multilingualism, and Profile 2 slightly disagrees with this. Finally, according to Profile 1, overall, it seems that for them, for those teachers, students' linguistic diversity is seen as a resource, and those participants would be willing to try and give opportunities to their students to use their other languages in class. Pre-service teachers aligning to Profile 2 believe that students' linguistic diversity is a hindrance, is an obstacle to their teaching, and also they would not give students opportunities to use their other languages in class. It would be confusing, it would be distracting. So let's have a look at the discussion of these results. So first of all, we found a broad consensus overall that shows an overall positive attitudes in this sample towards multilingualism, which is in line with other research being done in other national contexts. However, also in line with other research, even in the context of pre-service teacher education, monolingual ideologies and traditional views of multilingualism persist, as were found in Profile U3 and P2. With regards to U3, what is a bit problematic is the joint belief that, on the one hand, being multilingual implies communicating in at least 3 languages, and secondly, that multilingualism is an exception in schools. If we consider these two beliefs together, we can this suggests that these teachers might struggle or be unable to recognize and appreciate the linguistic diversity of their students. With regards to participants aligning with Profile P2, these teachers will just reject linguistically inclusive practices and may instead endorse a deficit model of teaching for multilingual students, where multilingualism is associated with learning needs, and monolingualism represents the norm in lesson. So first of all, these results point to the need for teacher education and training providers to firstly be aware of the beliefs about multilingualism that the student teachers bring to the course with them, but also to implement interventions aimed at furthering student teachers' knowledge of multilingualism and to increase their confidence in teaching in linguistically diverse contexts. Because I believe that behind these particular beliefs, there is also a lack of confidence in dealing with linguistic diversity. Which leads to the next steps in my PhD project. Now, in my PhD project, as I've been discussing, I've explored pre-service teachers' beliefs, but I was also interested in seeing if there is a relationship between these beliefs and the way these same participants identified linguistically. In other words, those that identified as multilingual or monolingual, did they have noticeable different beliefs because of their different exposure to languages or their different way of seeing themselves linguistically? And the next step was also to design and assess the effect of an intervention that, as I mentioned, was aimed at furthering pre-service teachers' understanding of multilingualism and confidence, but taking an identity-oriented approach, because I wanted them to reflect on their own linguistic identity, on their own exposure to languages, before actually thinking about their students' linguistic diversity. So this is, I'm assessing the effect of this intervention right now, so I look forward to sharing more data about that in the future. And in the meantime, I really thank you for listening to my presentation. And please do ask me any question if you have any. Thank you.